Good afternoon, members of the media, wider listening and looking public of Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to this week's post-cabinet media conference. I'm pleased to say that this week I have with me two of my colleagues, the Honorable Attorney General and the Honorable Minister of Health. We've come here to discuss a couple matters, well, three matters. So I'd start by asking the Minister of Health to address you, please.
Thank you very much and good afternoon to all. I would like to inform the national community that at the Cabinet meeting today, two major decisions were taken. The first major decision is that the Ministry of Health, which currently rents 4 floors at the corner of Edward and Park Street, will be constructing its new headquarters at a piece of land owned by the Ministry of Health, which spans number 6 Queen's Park East and number 49 Jerningham Avenue. So it's an LP shape of land where the MRFTT currently is. MRFTT stays there. We'll be constructing a new headquarters on the LP shape of land between Jerningham Avenue and Queen's Park East. And one of the reasons why we are doing this is that we were given notice to quit our current premises. The decision to build a headquarters for the Ministry of Health has been in abeyance since June 2002. So I am very grateful to the Cabinet today that we are going to take this decision after 2002 to now. The headquarters will be done via a bolt arrangement, starting first with design, build, own, lease, transfer. What that arrangement will do, several things. It will help mop up a lot of liquidity in the market. As you know, there's a lot of cash parked up in the banks. Money which is parked up and does not do anything is pretty useless. And will also be a fillip to the construction industry. So that is good news for the banking sector, for private investors. We urge private investors to make use of this facility where you'll be invited to use your money, your funds, and hopefully it will also stimulate the construction industry. The second major announcement concerns the Port of Spain Central Block. And for this, I really want to thank the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, in supporting the Ministry of Health in the furtherance of the health agenda. Cabinet took 2 decisions today. One, that the central block, a new central block will be built, which will contain 540 beds. The current central block at Port of Spain has 400 beds. So we are adding 140 new beds. That will be done in 2 phases. A site has already been identified. So let me explain the site. For those of you familiar with the layout of Port of Spain General Hospital, just to the south of the existing accident and emergency, there are a series of old colonial type buildings housing central stores, engineering, and biomedical. In the first phase of that project, we'll be constructing alternate, more modern facilities. And then once that is finished, we'll start to demolish those old buildings. Whilst that is going on, we are going out for a bold position, design, build, own, lease, and transfer for a new central block to house 540 beds. So whilst the construction of the new facilities to hold central stores, engineering, and biomedical is being done, while the site is being cleared, concurrently we go out for open tender via UDCOT for build, own, lease, and transfer. Again, just like the head office, this will help us utilize parked money, make it more productive. It's a wonderful opportunity for the private sector to get involved, and we will have a new central block done as soon as we can. Those are the two major announcements that we have today coming out of Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Minister Deyalsingh. The government will be utilizing these bolt arrangements. They help with our debt to equity ratios and financing, and we encourage those in the private sector to look very carefully when these RFPs come out, and we expect the fullest of participation. Now ask the Honorable Attorney General to address us.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon to Trinidad and Tobago. I just wish to carry a confirmation and continuation of yesterday's position as we brought to the forefront the issue of anti-gang legislation. The Cabinet certainly is now in a position to say that we will be moving to lay an anti-gang bill tomorrow in the Parliament. We expect to lay that bill and have it debated during the course of next week. The purpose of this anti-gang legislation is really purposeful on the back of statistical information and work carried out by the intelligence agencies in Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular at the behest of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has been very specific that its information, its intelligence demonstrates that there is a need for an anti-gang law in this country. We have moved Trinidad and Tobago from a very different position in the period 2011 to 2015, when we had anti-gang legislation, but we did not have the benefit of intelligence agencies working with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in the manner that we have now. And in those circumstances, the old law didn't really bring much by way of product. The number of arrests moving to prosecution and conviction were not demonstrative of any serious work by an anti-gang unit. The position is materially different on this occasion. As you know, yesterday we have literally detailed for Trinidad and Tobago the number of gangs in our country, the distribution across the 9 divisions of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the granular position of the several thousand persons that are associated with gang activity. And Trinidad and Tobago has also seen the creation of a new unit at the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, which is backed by a proclaimed and operational SSA agency gathering intelligence. In all of these circumstances, the country is now properly ready for evidence-driven detection and prosecution of gang activity. Put into a very real context, we cannot allow a situation such as has prevailed in Enterprise or in the Beetham most recently to rear its head in Trinidad and Tobago. We cannot continue to allow the circulation of videos across social media platforms where identifiable Trinidad and Tobago personnel, people, are involved in what appears to be gang activity or gang recruitment. The broad spectrum of the anti-gang law can capture this kind of behavior. The associative links and membership are caught by the anti-gang legislation, and the only thing that stands between an anti-gang law existing or not existing is the vote of the opposition. To ease the passage of the law, we propose to return to the Parliament to deal only with the anti-gang law. We will separate out the bail aspects of it. We propose further that this law will be the core rock law that was agreed to by the Joint Select Committee under the government of Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, and which stood as the law in Trinidad and Tobago for a full 5-year period until it expired in August 2016. We propose that that law return to the books of Trinidad and Tobago to be layered upon this new intelligence-driven atmosphere and operational structures in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And we have been urged by the law enforcement authorities themselves to do this. So we are very much welcoming the public advocacy behind this particular point. It is an effort to curb criminal activity in this country. it is an effort to restore law and order, peace and good governance, and we also call upon the opposition to advance the law which it, as a government, passed into the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. So, in essence, we ask you to look forward to this debate. It's very current, and we look forward to the population providing its support for this maneuver. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of the media, wider viewing public of Trinidad and Tobago, one of the issues that has been occupying a lot of national discussion within recent times is the issue of the inter-island sea service between Trinidad and Tobago. This administration has always taken very, very seriously that inter-island connectivity and has placed a lot of emphasis on it and has been doing its utmost best to ensure minimum disruption between Trinidad and Tobago via the seas. You all would recall that we've been having a lot of discussion with respect to it within recent times. I'd like to start by just setting out very clearly that there are two types of sea service between Trinidad and Tobago. There is the cargo service and there's the ferry service. As you all would recall, the cargo service came into some level of disruption earlier this year with the departure of the Galicia. That was very quickly, but with some level of disruption, dealt with by the Cabinet through the Ministry of Works and Transport and the Port Authority, and we got the Carbo Star in less than ideal circumstances, and in circumstances that are now attracting the attention of the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and in particular the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs has done a level of looking at the procurement associated with that. There was also the Christian Mute report that looked at it as well. So the cargo service at this time, whilst there are some suggestions that it may not be 100% perfect, it is working seamlessly between Trinidad and Tobago, and that service has been sorted out. What you all would recall with respect to the ferry service is we had two ferries, the Express and the Spirit, carrying passengers between Trinidad and Tobago. As a result of the departure of bay ferries and way overdue servicing and dry docking, the Spirit was recently sent for dry docking facilities, leaving just the Express to deal with the ferry service between Trinidad and Tobago. The Cabinet, through the Ministry of Works and Transport, had mandated that there be some open competitive tenders. Prior to that, there was a selective tender process that went underway. What we have discovered that since the previous administration to do with the cargo side, there were a number of attempts at tenders that had failed. Two had failed under the previous administration, and then under this administration, there were a couple failed tender services, but we now have the Carbo Star. With respect to the ferry service and the use of the Express and Spirit, those vessels were working fine. But then when the departure of bay ferries, some of the maintenance came into question. As I said, the Spirit has been dry docked. Noticing and seeing this taking place, the Cabinet then mandated that we go out and locate via a tender process a ferry to supplement the Express, the Spirit, and when the Spirit would come back out, the Express would go for dry docking. So we said, let's take in front and get a ferry to supplement that. As you all are aware, within recent times, under the Port of Trinidad and Tobago, they went out for tender. There were 5 tenderers who put in a number of vessels. I think the number of vessels equated to 12 vessels for this ferry service. An evaluation then took place with qualified evaluators as part of the evaluation process. They came back with a report and made certain recommendations. Unfortunately, it has turned out that once again, the tender process has failed to provide a ferry service or a ferry to provide this ferry service between Trinidad and Tobago. So this is now the 6th time it appears that the process that was being utilized, that is a tender process being managed by the Port Authority with the Ministry of Works and Transport, has failed to produce for the persons of Trinidad, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and the users of the inter-island sea service, a ferry. Immediately upon the cabinet becoming aware of this, the Honorable Prime Minister took charge of the situation. This has only taken place within the last week. He mandated that a very small sub-cabinet committee set about to take charge and to find a ferry in the shortest possible time to supplement. Right now, the Express is working. All resources are being placed on getting the Spirit back out. We expect the Spirit back out in the first quarter, sometime in the first quarter of 2018. We are putting all our resources on the Express, and we are also putting other contingency plans in place. But seeing the potential, this tender process having failed, and the Port Authority coming to the conclusion that it had failed, the Prime Minister mandated a small cabinet subcommittee of Minister Imbut, Minister Shamfa Kujo, Minister Robert LaHunt, and myself to find a ferry to ensure that the service continues unabated between Trinidad and Tobago, especially in light of the season that we're setting into now, which is the Christmas season, and then thereafter the Carnival season. This committee has been working at pace, and we have entered into the international arena, and we are having a number of discussions in the international shipping arena that we expect to bear fruit, and we will come back to the population of Trinidad and Tobago within the next couple of weeks with the solution that we've found. At this time, it's premature, and we don't want to announce anything, but the committee has been working, and it has been working with international shipping brokers. The committee has also written to the Ambassador of Canada, the Ambassador of Australia, the Ambassador of Japan, and the Consul of Italy, asking for their assistance with their respective countries, providing them with the specs that Cabinet had agreed for a ferry service. At this stage, there is nothing to be alarmed with. We've always come out and in the most transparent and accountable manners told the population of Trinidad and Tobago what is going on. We are disappointed, obviously, that once again a tender process has failed to provide a ferry for the service between Trinidad and Tobago. But we expect to be able to come back to the population, this small cabinet committee, to come back to the population after taking our findings and our solutions to cabinet within the next couple of weeks, and to make an announcement to Trinidad and Tobago that having removed it from the Port Authority, which unfortunately appears to have been hamstrung, and as you all would have heard from the Christian Mute report and things that took place thereafter, finding evidence of certain untoward behavior at the management level, and I dare say corruption, because I have received the forensic report that I had mandated be done out of the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, and I have now sent a copy of that to the Port Authority for them to take the necessary action with our initial findings, or with our findings, I should say, which resulted out of the forensics. So unfortunately, it appears, and we have the evidence, I mean, there have been 6 attempts by the Port Authority at a tender process to find a cargo vessel and a ferry. The Cabinet is no longer prepared to just sit by and allow those processes to take place. At the head of the Cabinet, the Prime Minister mandated this small committee to go out and get the job done. And I can assure the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we shall get the job done, and we will be coming back before you in the next couple of weeks with the solutions that we have found. That's what we have to say at this stage with respect to the inter-island service. We'll now open for a few questions.
What did the Port Authority say was the reasoning why the process failed? Because you're telling me now that this sub-cabinet committee could come back within 2 weeks with a solution. What's it doing different than the Port Authority wasn't doing all this time?
We aren't hamstrung by those who may want to influence a system through corrupt means or otherwise. Not at this stage.
Please.
But the sub-cabinet committee is now in a position where we have gone out to international brokers and we expect to find a vessel or vessels. I think what we found coming out of those previous attempts is that there may have been persons influencing the outcomes and persons doing certain things that did not throw up for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago the best possible results. I mean, how it's no matter of coincidence that 6 attempts at a tender fail.
Somebody or some people were deliberately attempting to sabotage and delay, maybe for political gain, maybe?
I don't think it's for political gain, but there are other types of gains associated in the world of corruption. Yes. There are all sorts of gains, monetary gains and otherwise.
When the process was tainted, is it the cabinet or the court?
Well, I think the results have shown it. For example, we had gone out, we had asked the port previously under this administration to go to international brokers earlier this year. I believe it was in April of this year. They invited 13 international brokers to provide their services to the port and to Trinidad and Tobago to find, at that time, a cargo vessel and a ferry. None of them responded. We don't believe that is possible, and in fact, this sub-cabinet committee has already been able to get past those hurdles of getting responses.
What is the leasing arrangement looking like in terms of time?
As soon as possible.
Would it be a 1-year lease?
Well, at this stage it's premature, and we may be coming with some better news than a leasing arrangement.
What can we do going forward to ensure that, because surely the subcommittee cannot be continuing to lease on behalf of the Port Authority.
The
so what are we
subcommittee
doing to alleviate that issue that the port clearly has at the moment?
That's a great question, and I'm reminded that what used to happen previously is situations similar to this. So in the 1980s, I'm told that there were 2 vessels that we got from the Dutch, that is the government directly, the Gelting and the Tisten, I believe, and then we had built to spec the Panorama, and then even the water taxis and the Express and Spirit were all driven from the government level. The last 4, that is the water taxis, the Express and the Spirit, were actually negotiated and contracted by NIDCO. This cabinet subcommittee would be using similar means. That is what we intend, is when we think we found a solution, NIDCO will then be the executing agency to enter into the necessary arrangements. Everything will be done properly, in proper procurement, and in accordance with the law. And we are not going to be hamstrung by management or those otherwise to influence the process.
We don't have to let you all know how bad the situation is with just one ferry, the long lines at the ferry terminal, what's going on in Tobago. With this news, people are going to be very upset. And now that you all have identified the problem at the Port Authority, have you also identified those people who are holding back the process, and can we expect some heads to roll here?
First of all, there is no crisis situation. So that which you speak of, that there are long lines, etc., the Express is working. We are going to do everything we possibly can to ensure that it continues to work. As I say, we are working on an immediate contingency plan. There are other vessels that can make that journey between Trinidad and Tobago. We've been supplementing it. For example, my understanding is on the weekends with the use of the water taxi, one of the water taxis. There are other possibilities along those lines. We are going to do everything we can to ensure there's minimum amount of disruption, hopefully no disruption at all. I am not going to preempt in any way whatsoever a proper due process taking place with respect to what has been found forensically and otherwise for the port to be able to do what they need to do. So I'm not going to stand here and say about any heads rolling, etc. Work has been work. This government always makes sure that somebody is held accountable, or persons will be held accountable.
You all a date where you want to see the ferry pulling up in the port?
We certainly did, and we're working towards that date. Well, first of all, it would depend on what vessel we can get, what type of arrangement we can enter into. But as I said, what we're aiming to do is ensure there's minimum or no disruption over the Christmas period into Carnival.
People that they're looking at?
A short list of?
People that you're reaching out to?
Yes, the committee has reached out to, in addition to the various countries I've identified, we have reached out to about 10 international shipping brokers.
You mentioned the process in terms of obtaining boats previously with regards to the water taxi and previous ferries. Why was there a change to the Port Authority if that was successful previously?
That's a good question, and when we did some tracing back, it appeared to have taken place in the 2013-2014 process and how the Galicia came into being. That previously it was done via the Ministry of Works, NIDCO, and these other organizations and agencies. But it seemed that in that attempt to get a cargo ferry, because of course the ferries were working at that time, even though they weren't being maintained as they should have been, that somewhere in between there the process changed. So it was just a continuum of that process. You will remember, if you go back and check it, and in the Christian Mute report, he identifies 2 failed and cancelled tender processes during that period. And that just seems to have built the momentum coming forward into this administration. So when we looked at it and we realized another one had failed, we have now intervened at our level and we're taking it over.
Committee, when are you expecting to see a vessel in Trinidad and Tobago waters? We're looking at what, March next year, February next year?
In the shortest possible time frame.
Quite some time. People have been waiting for quite some time.
And this is the first time that there's now this cabinet committee dealing with it. Have some patience. I am pretty certain in the next couple of weeks we'll be coming to you all with an announcement.
There are no more questions. I was going to actually bring in the Attorney General on the gang legislation, because the problem I have is we have a parliamentary tradition almost of the opposition and government over years just simply exchanging roles, and like what a particular party may agree upon when its turn is in office, when they find themselves in opposition, it could be the identical bill, the identical issue, but something grates, and they, so my question is, do you have confidence you'll be able to overcome that, and has there been any sort of cross-party talks from now?
Let's deal with facts. The PNM's record in opposition was to support 96% of the work brought by the UNC government, even in the face of the entire independent bench saying no. The opposition PNM voted for legislation. So I don't know what tradition you're talking about when you say people swap roles. That's not the case under the Keith Rowley-led administration. No, I'm dealing with facts, right? So 96% is 96%. That is something that just won't go away. The other point is, this law is being proposed on the back of the opposition's observation in correspondence. Firstly, that there were concerns that they had as to having proper intelligence, functioning intelligence. Secondly, the fact that an anti-gang unit was required. They in fact made the observation that several persons that comprised the anti-gang unit when they were in office were before the courts on capital charges. Thirdly, they made reference to the need for a functioning justice protection program, that is witness protection. And fourthly, they made reference simply to a definitional clarification with respect to gang members and gang activity. We have addressed all of those matters. I've put forward the statistics into the public domain. Streets are known, members are known, activities are linked. We've come with Trinidad and Tobago statistics. We've given you the numbers, the identification, the demographics, etc. We have proclaimed the SSA legislation. There's a functioning aspect for serious crime, which includes gang activity. The Justice Protection Program is well at work, and we have attended to the minor tweaking of the legislation. Therefore, there is nothing that ought to stand in logical measure between the passage of that law and the request for the passage of that law from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, because this is going to be a bill which was good enough for Mrs. Prasad Bisesa when she was Prime Minister, because it was the law for the entire time that she was there. It was good enough for the entire UNC bench. It was good enough for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. It was good enough for the courts of Trinidad and Tobago, because there's been no negative reflection on the anti-gang law as it stood before it expired. So the normal tradition of parliamentary work is you take a bill to Parliament. The PNM has gone a mile and a half extra, figuratively speaking, because what we have done is to write to the opposition, give them submissions, give them data, etc. in previous correspondence, and therefore all that is required is for the UNC to say what was good enough for us is good enough for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's it. I'd just like to, Akash, remind you in relation to your question to Minister Young. A vessel to do the inter-island routing is not an off-the-shelf item. The availability of vessels is also determined by high season or low season requirements. When we saw the peak difficulties at the port in the transportation issues between Trinidad and Tobago, that was high season. That was what you call the summer vacation for Europe, etc. We are not in that period right now. We're in low season. Secondly, the bespoke vessels, etc., is another matter which the government has already spoken to. So there is certainly a very different field of play from what prevailed in the last round of difficulties there. What is required is an understanding and patience, and we must not run away with salacious arguments that, quote unquote, there is a crisis or there is a fact. Let's go and check it in reality, and you'll see that the conversation is very different from what is the subject of some of the comments made a little bit earlier.
In reality, though, it was at that time. It was pretty.
We're looking at vessels sailing with 30% capacity in some instances, etc. And what is required is for a proper statistical understanding of where we stand. I want to urge us as a country to go to facts, not scandal, not elements of the reflective position. We have to go to facts. That's the only way we're going to have measure and discipline in how we make decisions.
I'll just before you go to that, anything else, just to add to what my colleague, the Attorney General, has said and bring it back to the anti-gang legislation that we're about to lay in Parliament. In a very sobering manner, I'd like the country to understand exactly what it is we're dealing with. We've had some behavior within recent times. Everyone has seen what is taking place on social media, the type of videos that are going viral, etc. This government is about the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We are taking their legislation that was good enough for them to the Parliament to protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And we have our 23 votes already there. It lies squarely at their feet. On the last time that we were in Parliament asking for an extension of their legislation, they asked for data, they asked for information. All of that has been provided to them in writing for months now. We also offered them in writing to come and sit with the Honourable Attorney General and his team, the drafts people, to deal with any amendment that they wanted made. So citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we have held out to the opposition. This was an offer by the Prime Minister to the Leader of Opposition that was then followed up by the Attorney General to her appointed person, Senator Ramdeen. We provided them with everything that we have in our possession, asked them to come and sit with us. If they want to make any amendments, we have the drafts people there ready to deal with them. We have done all of that. They have now changed the goalposts and they're saying, bring the bill and we'll deal with it in Parliament. We are going to Parliament, and this is being done to protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And it is for every parliamentarian to do what is right. And statistically, and the data shows, and the facts, as the Attorney General says show, that this is their legislation. And only the passage of time, and we've seen the type of behavior and what is taking place now. This is a government solution, and we call upon everybody to act responsibly and to support the legislation, and let's pass it for Trinidad and Tobago.
We talked about not giving bail to persons who are found in, with guns repeatedly. Right, I'm not sure if it was part of the anti-gang bill or part of the bail bill, but I know that you just said you're taking out the bail aspects of the anti-gang bill that you're going before Parliament with. What are the implications of doing that in terms of, because a large part of gang-related activity has to do with guns and then bail, and then they go back out.
Sure. Anti-gang and bail stand separate, but obviously there's a linkage. Trinidad and Tobago had a Bail Act which was passed in 1994. And then there were many amendments that happened to the Bail Act, basically getting more and more strict over time, going from 3 strikes to 2 strikes to 1 strike to a charge. All of that collapsed when the UNC allowed the expiration clause, the sunset clause, to set. They didn't care whether kidnapping for ransom was being thrown out, child molestation, sexual offenses against children. All of that fell flat when the expiry of the law came on August 15, 2016. To make this easy to make it simple, we're not going to even bring the bail issue together with the anti-gang law. I'm going to put that separately because it can be treated with separately. So we are bringing a very simple, straightforward law, which, let me put it squarely again, which is exactly the law that was good enough for Trinidad and Tobago under Kamla Prasad Bisesa. We're bringing that law back to the Parliament. And therefore, there is no logical reason for it not to achieve support and pass into law. Specifically, this is driven by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. They have asked for it. You've heard them in media conferences saying, we have no anti-gang law. What was missing was the support of a government to the TTPS, the creation of a unit, the staffing, the supply of intelligence by a reformed intelligence agency. None of that was done. Yesterday, I gave you statistics, numbers, areas, divisions of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to ask the citizens of this country, when is it going to be enough? That video of Nikki Crosby saying that she vomited out of fear for the incident at the Beetham. When are we going to stop having that? Because the conversation moved away from the police going behind known gang members in the Beetham to supporters of that gang reality coming out to intimidate the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The truth is the police had the situation well under control. Obviously, there may be a flare and then there's a suppression that happens. But the conversation has moved away from that kind of gang support. And the country has got to say enough is enough. We, as a government, can only bring legislation and support agencies. We've supported the agencies and we're bringing the legislation. And we have provided it since August 4th, 2017. What has to happen as well is an intolerance for goalpost shifting. We have been consistent in our path. We have complied with all of the requests of the leader of the opposition. No government before this government, in my memory, has come out with statistics of Trinidad and Tobago the way we do. No government, certainly no Attorney General's office, has come out and provided track change version of bills, statistical information, background. Usually, you get called to Parliament and you are presented with a bill. I've served in Parliament now for 7 years, going on 8 years. I have never participated with the kind of courtesy that the Attorney General's office offers now in the Parliament for the time that the UNC was in control. So I want to caution against lumping all politicians in the same dirty pot. It's not true. You cannot have stood in opposition as we did, support 94 to 96% of the work that came from the last government, and say that we are in the same circumstance as they are.
Mr. Al-Rawi, treating with both separately, what I want to find out is from a law perspective, are there any loopholes that perhaps criminal lawyers can use which may actually put...
In not treating with the bail at the same time? No. We have Section 6 of the Bail Act, Section 4 of the Bail Act, as it stands right now, allows for judicial discretion for bail to be applied in circumstances. What the anti-gang law does is that it creates the crime of being in a gang, of being a gang leader, of having gang membership, of recruiting, of going to schools, of going to places of worship and carrying out activities. That law does not exist. So you see all of those videos of X gang versus Y gang, who has more gold chain than who carrying weapons more than who is going to carry out what mission. All of that now forms evidence of gang activity, and that means that you're going to have people in trouble. That did not exist before. It has reared its head. All of us know about it. And it can't just be that it is just 23 members in the House of Representatives that have a point of view. Surely the people of Trinidad and Tobago have a point of view, and surely the media has a point of view, because I didn't notice this as a very prominent story carried in the press. Certainly it was buried somewhere down at page 5, page 6 of a few of the newspapers. I don't know when last the media was given the specific number of gang members in Trinidad and Tobago, or by location or by division. I thought that was quite unique. I guess I'm on my own in that view. Yeah, well, there comes a point, Ria, if I say this, where Bacchanal has to take a backseat to the safety of Trinidad and Tobago.
Minister Deyalsingh, going back to the central block for the Port of Spain Hospital, I just would like to know how many patients possibly would be affected when construction on the central block begins.
So no patients are going to be affected. We are building a new central block. When that new central block is finished, then patients from the old central block will move across.
There will be no breaking down of the old block?
No, sir. We have identified a site for the construction of a new block. What we are doing in the initial phase is constructing new facilities for certain departments like engineering, central stores. They will then be moved. When they are moved, we demolish the old colonial style buildings which have been condemned. And on that site, which is just south of the existing A&E, will be the site for the new central block, 540 beds. What I also want to alert the national community to is that once we do that, with all the hospital construction projects, Point Fortin and Arima, our current bed stock in Trinidad and Tobago is 3,167, which gives you a bed to patient ratio of 2.43 per thousand. That's how we measure things internationally. When all the hospital construction projects are finished, including the new central block, the additional space will move from 3,167 beds to 3,827 beds, which then gives you a bed to patient ratio of 2.94 per thousand. That will then put us in the same league as countries like the United Kingdom and the United States, where we can measure against. Added to that, we estimate in the private sector, you have about 450 to 500 beds. If you add that bed stock for the totality, we will then move to over 3.3 beds per thousand, which is a pretty good place to be in when you combine the public stock with the private stock.
Economy, do you have any concerns at all relying solely on the bolt arrangements?
No, we are confident that investors will come forward. As we say, parked money earns nothing. We need to put money to work. The same way you put people to work, money is only valuable if you put it to work. And there's so much excess liquidity in the system, we feel confident that investors, whether private, local investors, or foreign investors, will see this as an opportunity for them.
We'll have this project done by, or do you have a time frame where you like to see it
As
materialize?
soon as humanly possible. We are going to start the process right now. Cabinet has given me the authority to start the process as of today.
Ria.
I just want to go back to the issue with the ferry because I have some angry Tobagonians on the phone here with me. In the future, going forward, seen as the Port Authority has failed 6 times, will the responsibility of procuring a vessel in the future be given to the Port Authority, or should we just do this cabinet subcommittee thing or another body? Because if you all could do it in the shortest time possible and in 2 weeks you'll have an answer for us, then clearly the Port Authority isn't either equipped to get it done or doesn't have the personnel to get it done.
The government is looking at it. The government has moved in at the cabinet level to do what we think is necessary at this point in time to ensure there's a solution in the shortest possible time frame. As I said, prior to this and on other occasions, they'd use other state agencies like NIDCO. We'll look at it and we'll come to a conclusion on it. Ria.
I have 2 questions. One on the anti-gang bill. Wouldn't it have been better to have taken that bill to the Senate, where the environment is less partisan and more reasonable, and have it passed, and then use that momentum to take it into the House of Representatives?
The tactic of approaching the Senate as opposed to the House of Representatives really doesn't arise at all, because you have, as Minister Young put it so powerfully, you have 23 votes on the government side. We require the opposition's support in the lower house. They are the persons that have paternity of the same bill. Therefore, it is so axiomatically simple that passage ought to really flourish. Therefore, the population ought to have an answer very quickly as to who is intent on supporting the law, upholding the best interests of Trinidad and Tobago or not. We're not required to play games here or to engage in tactics. It's either the opposition says yes to their own law or says no to their own law. And then they have to explain to the country why.
The other matter, we see today that the person who made the accusation of sexual harassment against the Angostura chairman has been fired for allegedly performance-related matters. But given what is taking place in the world at the moment in particular, and the kind of, almost the avalanche of actions being taken against people who are accused of any sexually inappropriate behavior, does it worry the government that Trinidad and Tobago is being seen to be almost punishing the victim and going against what could be deemed, well, what is progressive, the progressive trend, and whether the competitors of Angostura, the external competitors of Angostura, could use what is taking place to hurt the company, because we see there's this call for a boycott, and companies outside looking on can use this against the company, which can affect, of course, its economic prosperity.
First of all, the situation at Angostura is Angostura's. There's a board of Angostura, there's a management of Angostura. Secondly, this government does not tolerate or support in any form or fashion discrimination or wrongdoing. However, there is due process in this country. This issue at Angostura is one which has passed through several layers of process. There are rights in this country, and we have very robust courts as well. The actions that you've referred to in other jurisdictions where there are allegations of discrimination and impropriety, all are going through a due process environment. But I want to just say something very carefully. The situation at Angostura, from another perspective, there is a significant amount of investigative work that has been undertaken in relation to matters concerning fraud, conspiracies, etc. Forensic reports have been conducted and finished, and there are matters that are receiving attention. And I would just be very careful to caution that we need to make sure that all facts are known first before we go there. So let me put this in a clean context. The firing of someone who I don't even know, I'm not aware of, etc., the government has no part or function or fashion in that. There is a fiduciary responsibility and role and function of the board and management of Angostura to do as it proposes and as it has done. There is a clear process of rights that can be upheld in any court of law, and our courts are very robust in that fashion, and we certainly support that. What I can tell you is that Angostura is not a very simple environment, and that there is a lot that is afoot that is the subject of significant work and investigative function, and which will no doubt find itself in the proper forum at the proper time.
Resigned from every other board that he was on.
I am very, very, very careful not to associate myself with guessing as to why someone has done something or not. Public pressure and public ridicule are not easy things in this country. I should know. It's not an easy thing. And what I certainly don't do is to celebrate in guesses, hypotheticals, or positions. It really is essential that we confine ourselves to facts and circumstances. And if you look to the multiple levels of public disclosure in relation to the umpteen reports that have come out, disciplinary committee, Mr. Justice Nelson. Mr. Justice Nelson is no small man in the arena of law. I don't know what those things say. I'm not involved in any of that, but I'm always very cautious to make sure that the full story is known.
Question, a little off topic. Has the cabinet received any report concerning the escape of Vicky Boodram from prison?
The cabinet, I am actually acting as the Minister of National Security right now. I see one of the calls that was coming through was from the Commissioner of Prisons, who I've been in constant contact with. Yesterday evening, I also met with the Commissioner of Police. We have been in cabinet. There was no report presented to cabinet today, but we've been in cabinet. I haven't been able to be in touch with them for the most recent update since this morning, as we don't carry our phones into cabinet. And I will be getting an update shortly, I'm sure.
Share the absolute the population is at a complete loss as to how all the persons who had custody of Ms. Boodram just left her. I mean, at some stage, someone left her standing without any security.
The answer is yes. When I first became aware of this incident a couple days ago, like every other law-abiding citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I was in a state of complete shock and disbelief. Immediately upon making inquiries, as a government, what we do is we just stand in support of our law enforcement agencies, encourage them along the right path, and we all await the outcome. But there is no doubt in any reasonable person's mind that there must be persons or people held accountable for what has happened. There has been a breakdown. We all wait anxiously to find out where that breakdown took place. And I can tell you all, without breaching the confidence of my meeting with the Commissioner of Police yesterday, he is intent on, when a person is found to be accountable, to use the powers that he has over the TTPS to ensure that there is discipline. But I don't want to be premature. We're still waiting on the gathering of the facts. It may have happened in the last few hours, I'm not sure. But yes, the answer is, as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, we are very concerned and we await the outcome of the investigations that are taking place.
For Ms. Boodram and the investigations is going on along that path. Is an investigation also going on within the judiciary, within the court system? Because let's say the officers did come with a document.
The answer is yes.
Should we be looking at who stamped it in the first place, who allowed that document?
The answer is yes. In fact, as part of the conversations I had yesterday, that particular document has gone along the chain of custody now into the hands of the police officers who are actively investigating this. And just like you, we would assume that that is the line of investigation that needs to take place. Where did this document originate from? Who is it that authorized this? We know it's not a real document. I have that information, that the signature on the document is a fraudulent signature. How does someone get a stamp, etc.? So let's wait the outcome of that. But yes, that investigation is taking place. And I would expect, and I can say here now publicly and openly, we expect that the fullest possible investigation takes place and that there will be protection of absolutely no one.
It takes long to find out she escaped though, because she, according to the prison commissioner, she would have left on Monday night. We found out via a leaked internal memo on Tuesday, and the only official correspondence from the TTPS asking the public to look out for her came after 6 p.m. on Tuesday, saying to call 800 tips 555. Why weren't we told the next day, the morning? I live in Aruka, and that's around the area. Maybe I saw her.
Well, you know, we're getting a lot of conflicting reports, and I'm seeing, I mean, one of the things I was discussing with some of my colleagues is we're getting conflicting reports from the media. So I'm seeing suggestions she appeared in court, etc. There's another suggestion that no, she never went to court. From the women's prison, she was taken to the Tunapuna police station, and whoosh. But then another media report reports that no, she turned up in Superior Court the next morning. I want to wait the outcome of the written reports that are going to be provided to me by both the prison service and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And at that stage, then I would be in a position to comment with facts. I'm not going to speculate at this stage.
Can I?
The first impression, the first announcement that I certainly was brought or made aware of was when the internal memo of the Immigration Service went viral. Look out at the ports for this. I am not in a position now to answer for either the prison service or the police service as to why it took so long, or did it really take so long? Was it a combination of errors or subterfuge, etc., as to why it took so long for us to be alerted? I simply don't have the answer for that.
Can I just add something into this? And this is a general statement. There's a very old saying from Napoleon: never disturb your enemy when he's in the middle of making a mistake. If you jump out the blocks too fast, form a position too quickly, say something which alerts somebody to exactly the wrongdoing that they're doing, you'd be in trouble. We're living in an environment of fake news. We're living in an environment of need for sobriety, and it is really important that you get the facts straight. How fast you get the facts is also critical. So let's just be careful to make sure we get the story right. I was in Guyana recently and in Jamaica recently, and I'm astounded at how thin their newspapers are. Really and truly astounded. I sometimes wonder if it's, you know, a little handout publication or something like that. Our newspapers don't look anything like that. So we have to make sure that we get things managed carefully. What Minister Young, acting as Minister of National Security, is doing is bringing in the facts. Secondly, the Commissioner of Police, as he said, this is the important conversation. He has the constitutional authority under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, the supreme law of Trinidad and Tobago, to manage the police force. And we certainly expect that that will be carried out anxiously and with full force. The good news about this situation is that the pot is not too large, so we cannot expect this thing to take too long.
Yes.
You said that the document had fake signatures, but did the document in fact originate from within the court? Can you confirm?
And that is the investigation that I expect to be taking place now, and I have not been provided with the answer to that as yet.
Do you think that we need to perhaps have certain things in place whereby certain documents, just like we have in money, you can't really, well, you can forge it, but there are certain things on it that you know it's original, right, like a watermark and so on. Do you think that we can actually have those things with certain important documents, things like warrants, things that come from the courts?
I think the answer is let's wait and see what is the outcome of the investigation. I mean, I've been around the court system for a long time, and it is not difficult for stamps to be created, etc. Obviously, we would expect that the authorities, having gone through this experience now, would tighten up procedures, etc. But as the AG has said, I don't want to speculate. I'm not into the realm of speculation. Let's wait and see what the outcome is. But what I do expect is, as a country, every time an error is made, we learn from the error and we try to plug whatever gaps there may be. Okay, last
question. This comes from our business reporter of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. The TTMA said it's been 2 years and an entire year since they got their VAT refunds, and they're wondering what's the update with that.
In my discussions with the Minister of Finance over the last 24 hours, I believe that a release will come out very shortly from the Ministry of Finance directed specifically at that issue. What I was being told last night is it appears as though there's been a complete misinterpretation of a report from the IMF. And let's just wait for the Ministry of Finance to clarify. I believe this may be another instance of what the Honorable Attorney General referred to a short while ago as fake and false news, and that is about to be corrected. And I was quite shocked at what I was told last night, and I certainly hope there is not an element of mischief afoot by the persons who have been promulgating exactly what you've just referred to. All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time as usual.